So as you can see, the society gives you an award and then says, and now you need to do some more. And so I'm really delighted to be joined on this panel by, if I start from my kind of my right to your left, Peter Matthews, who was one of the founders, Carolyn Roberts, also kind of heavily involved and former chair as well of the society, Emma, who you know, and Will Pope, who was also instrumental in helping to form the society, and who also was chair only once, but twice, yeah. So so we have kind of people with a long history in the society. We're going to spend a few moments kind of with a bit of reflection on how we got to where we are today, but also we're going to use this as an opportunity to look forwards as well, because I guess I'm one of those people on the boards that is always kind of forward-looking. So we're going to start with Will, who's going to give us a little bit of a background and a perspective on where the society's come from and what we've been doing so far.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin, and good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you all here. And it's warm in here, isn't it? We won't mention climate change then. A bit like the preparations for the election so far. I've not heard much on the environment, or I missed it. Anyway, what I'm going to try and do is look back a little bit and forward a little bit as well in the 5 minutes that I've been given to say some words together this afternoon. And actually, I heard two things particularly so far that I think chime a little bit with the way my mind's working and the way others are thinking as well. And first of all, it was when Dougal said, "We go again," and I so buy into that as well. We are not finished, we go again. And Martin's comment, Martin, you said environmental problems are going faster than we're dealing, growing faster than we're dealing with. I think so. From my point of view, the Society of the Environment actually started in 1999 with some very informal discussions and some rather long lunches in London between interested people, and interested professional bodies as well, including the IES and a number. But eventually, we established a mission to put together what we hoped would be a chartered body for environmentalists, and we established something called CUBE. For those of you who remember CUBE, the Chartered Umbrella Body for the Environment, it wasn't perhaps the catchiest name that we'd ever thought of, but anyway, that was the initial body, informal body, and it was established to do what we hoped would be to mirror the existing professions in engineering, for example, or law or medicine or whatever, and some of those with a 200 plus year history, of course, to professionalize the environmental, or to help professionalize the environmental industry by having the Royal Charter. In actual fact, the first thing I remember being told by colleagues from Privy Council and government, and actually the Environment Minister at the time, was it'll never happen, or it'll take 20 or 30 years, so don't hold your breath. In actual fact, we got it done in just a shade over 5 years. In May, got the charter in May 2004. Thanks to all the teamwork, some fantastic teamwork, and also some contributions of startup monies from the initial professional bodies, all these practical things that were so important. And actually, I recall collecting the charter from the House of Lords, and one of the things I hadn't prepared for was how physically big it was going to be. So I rolled up at the House of Lords, thinking I'll just pick up that charter and I'll go home. And I got this enormous parchmenty thing, which everybody on the tube on the way home thought was rather amusing. I wonder what's in there, sort of glances I was getting. So I should have planned ahead on that. We didn't have an office at the time either, because it was early days. So I'd actually spent 2 years in my spare bedroom at home. But my wife was very glad to see the back of it when we eventually did get an office. But here we are today. So we've registered over 11,000 CMs in the period from all over the world, and thanks to all our constituent partners who actually achieved this together. but we've got a long way to go yet, I think. And my personal vision right at the beginning was that I wanted to see the normalization of the environmental profession. I think I will only ever be happy if I see the environment profession being as normal, if normal indeed it is, of law or accountancy or engineering or whatever, and if there are environmental consultancy professionals on the high street, literally. I won't go into it, so I know I've only got 5 minutes, so I won't go into a story. Remind me to tell you a story about when I was a student and how somebody told me that this thing will never take off. But anyway, but in terms of Dougal's point about we go again, he's absolutely right, because we as a society, I think, are far too slow in delivering the change that we know we want. And I'll just cite a few examples. Asbestos was actually found to be a health hazard in 1898, but wasn't controlled until the 1930s, and it wasn't completely banned until the 1980s, and actually still in use today. Smoking, Peter and Doll proved conclusively that smoking was a cause of cancer in 1953, and here we are today, still with the only legal way, the only thing you can legally buy that, if you use it as designed, will lead to your early demise. Air pollution. We've been breaking the law for over 10 years now. We know that 40,000 excess deaths per year because of the air pollution. Wind power. We were, in the early 2000s, the biggest world market for wind power. We had one manufacturer of turbines on the Isle of Wight, which actually closed. And then we've got one now in the northeast, but there are 10 or 12,000 seriously big wind turbines in the UK, most of which are manufactured in continental Europe or indeed the East. There are 300,000 or 400,000 worldwide, heading for 1 million, and we've completely missed that market. So I think we're far too slow. I was going to say a few words about civilizations, but I think I'll just say one thing, that we've got to be careful. I've got preparing a paper on this. I'll send you a copy of it. We've got to be very careful that we as a society don't press the environmental self-destruct button, and we're getting closer, ever closer to pressing. We still don't do a proper professional job, in my view, in an awful lot of the environmental stuff that our professions work in. With full life cycle analysis, environmental life cycle analysis is not done properly, in my view. And whether you're taking lithium for batteries or indeed the increase in surface roughness of the world because of heading for a million wind turbines at the moment. And I'm not going to go towards I think, just in conclusion, though, one of the things that I worry about particularly is the avoidance of issues still, not by you or colleagues online. So I'm not. This is about society as a whole. We've still got a long way to go. We still are not addressing at the right level these environmental challenges with seriousness that we need to take. And using the politics example, I think, is a good one. How much has environment so far figured in politics, in the election preparation so far? I would say it's zero or close compared to matters. Anyway, for all those reasons, that's why, in my view, we need an environmental profession. That's why we need a society for the environment. I want to see 100,000 on the register rather than 10,000 on the register numbers. And that's why training and skills and experience are also important. And just in conclusion, I think we should only be happy when environment is intrinsic to every decision that's made, whether in business, in government, or wherever. And just as intrinsic as the finances taken into account for health and safety or law. We've got a long way to go. So, Dougal, we go again. Let's go for it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Will. And some of us might think that the environment did feature quite heavily on the launch of the election. As the Prime Minister was being drenched in rain on the day that the world meteorological, the climate experts pronounced that this was the wettest 6 months that we've had is down to human-induced climate change. So there was a certain irony there of climate change featuring very kind of forcefully in the election. Peter, I'm going to come to you, please. You were one of those capitalists with the constituent united body on the Environment Cube, and it would be kind of really good to hear your perspectives on, how we got to where we are and say some of the challenges that we're facing.
Thank you. Well, much of what I wanted to say was expressed in the video, and Will already talked about many of the things which I believe in. But those of you that know me know that I am the eternal optimist. And I think we've got a lot to celebrate. This is not being complacent. In 1999, at the millennium, an environmentalist was a tree hugger, someone to be laughed at. And our dream was to couple the passion of being an environmentalist with the gravitas of the charter. And I think it's succeeded. I think we've got a lot to celebrate. Who could have imagined 20 years on, and 20 years is nothing in the span of a society, as an organisation and as a whole. We need to learn the lessons of how we've been successful as to how we can be more successful in future. The next thing that I would observe about the society is that all of us in the society and in the individual licensed bodies exhort government to be more coordinated, for all the government departments and the arm's length bodies to work together in an integrated approach. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that as a partnership organisation, societies and institutions within the Society of the Environment that compete on a day-to-day basis for members work together for the greater good of the environment. So what I would say is that we're living the dream that we expect any government to have as well, working together in partnership. Now, the last thing is slightly more obtuse. You're going to have to forgive me for this. It's about the concept of knowledge management. For those of you that have been involved in institutional learning will know that knowledge management is one of those institutional models. And in fact, in recent years, it's developed as wisdom management. Wisdom is about the beneficial application of learning. And creativity and innovation lie beyond wisdom. This organisation has got to grab all those aspects of the learning cycle to move forward in the future. One of the aspects about the society and its corporate members is that there is a range of ages in these institutions, and we celebrate the passion of youth. But as someone who's 81, I do decry the fact that sometimes our corporate memories are pretty short. And what I would hope in the future is that we can bring together the experience of older people, retired people, who have still got a role to play, with the enthusiasm of the younger people. Now, if you bring all this together, about knowledge management and the different age ranges, it's about networking. We know a lot of people, and I characterise this as knitworking, in which we take all the threads and we embroider it together in new, vibrant patterns. So join us for 20 years of knitworking within the Society for the Environment.
Great, thank you, Peter. And I think that whole knowledge management and the dissemination of that is absolutely critical, because my perspective is that we have all the solutions to the challenges that we face. We're just not deploying them. So it's really a question of how we organise ourselves for delivery, rather than have to develop have too much focus on kind of the new stuff. But maybe you're going to challenge me. So yeah, here we go, Caroline.
Okay, thank you. So we had a little meeting about what we were going to say last week, I think it was, and I said I would give a personal reflection rather than a kind of institutional one, but I will link to the institution, obviously. Those of you who know me, as somebody said earlier, will know I've had a rather portfolio career. I've always been an academic, or for many years was an academic, most recently in Oxford, but I've also always run my own consultancy business. And it's that I want to talk about for a minute. I began my life as an academic, a geomorphologist actually, and a hydrologist with interest in flooding and drought and dust. Actually, I did quite a bit of work in the Sahara, and I started my sort of consultancy career with environmental impact assessments, as many of us did in those days. And I was asked to look at particularly things like the impact of building or making large holes in the ground for sand and gravel extraction and minerals or waste disposal, that kind of thing. And so I'm talking now 30 years ago, before the start of Society for the Environment. And I have to say that what we did was very amateurish, looking back on reflection. We were passionate, but we were innocent. And we certainly didn't work in partnerships. Just to give you an example of that, I remember sitting in a public inquiry, and I was actually scheduled to give evidence about water. It was for a hole in the ground somewhere in Warwickshire, I think it was. And I sat and watched an ecologist completely destroyed by the barrister for the opposition. And it was horrible. And the thing was that none of us did anything to help. We were on the same side and we did nothing to help. There was no collaboration, no cooperation, because none of us knew what he was going to say. So there'd been no prior discussions about collaborating. Now, we were all doing single subjects, and nobody had any credentials apart from, importantly, perhaps fellowship of one of the professional bodies or membership of one of the professional bodies. In my case, the Institution of Environmental Sciences, like Will, and SocEnv, like Peter. And we just traded on that. We traded on those professional bodies. But gradually the work got more legally binding rather than discretionary almost. And I can't actually remember when I became a CEnv. It must have been pretty early on. And I wasn't part of the original founding group, but I did become a member of the, I think, trustees, were we at that time? Pretty early on. And professional accreditation began to be much more important. So later on, I started to do other kinds of work. And some of you will know I do work for the police from time to time, tracing dead bodies floating down rivers, or sometimes where they found one and they want to know where it might have come from. And when you're going to start appearing in court, you're going to need some kind of professional accreditation. And a lot of the work that we do these days, we're going to be in court, one kind of court or another. I can see Martin nodding. So certainly we have our single subject interest, but we are much more, it's much more necessary that we collaborate and we understand the full range of what we are dealing with. So multidisciplinarity has become very much more important, and there's been a huge growth in that, in cooperation and in professionalism, driven in part by Society for the Environment, I have to say. And I'm very keen on Society for the Environment. I've supported, Adam Donnan is here in the audience somewhere, but like Adam, I've supported, I don't know, hundreds of people probably through the chartership process. It's been actually delightful to meet these people and to understand more about their specialisms. I've learned a lot from it, and I'm sure, well, I hope they have too. There's been more and more focus on multidisciplinarity, as I said, understanding the full range of things, but also on codes of practice and on ethics. And I think those things are really important as well. Some of you will know that some of the work that I'm doing at the moment, I'm the proposed class representative for the legal action against the water companies for polluting with sewage. My husband says I shouldn't say that in conferences because I stand a good risk of being assassinated by somebody because of the amount of money that's involved. Not that I'm getting it, I should say, but is involved. It's something I feel passionate about. Codes of practice and ethics are very, very important, crucial. And we certainly need more people to be involved as chartered environmentalists and as members also of the licensed bodies. More people, certainly. Growth in those numbers is important. But my final comment here was I think we mustn't lose not only the wisdom that Peter was talking about, but the freshness, the innovation, the curiosity, the agility to move into new areas and grab new opportunities quickly so that we can be on top of some of these environmental problems before they become really serious. So that's how I'll end my chatter, Martin. Let's carry on being curious.
Thanks, Carolyn, and your comments about environmental impact assessments really resonate. When I first started at IEMA back in 1992, which is a long time ago, I recall the first environmental statements for an asbestos landfill. And the whole of the assessment was written into 2.5 pages of A4. And that was the basis on which all of the assessments of all the effects were done and a decision was made. Fast forward to last summer and the Supreme Court case for the Surrey oil wells, which is in the Supreme Court, and guidance produced by IEMA on how to assess climate change effects for new development is part of the centre of that and is accepted by all sides as the definitive guidance. So I think we kind of moved it into that, professionals and professional bodies helping to set the standards against which we are evaluating projects. We will see what happens with that case. Now, I'm going to turn to Emma because I think we've heard a lot about the past, but actually we also need to think about the future. And it would be really good to get your insights into where, as a profession, we need to head in order to have greatest effect.
So, thanks, Martin. I'm going to pick a couple of phrases that we heard already. So, yeah, I completely agree with the "we go again." Fantastic to celebrate 20 years, and we mustn't lose sight of that achievement. But actually, turning forward, we've got a lot of work to do. The other word that's come up a few times is status as well, and I think environmental professionals have got good status now, but we need to do more and we need to do better. So I think for us to move forward, we need to continue to raise that status. And when I talk to people about professional registration, often people talk about the assessment, the competency, that kind of day, that interview. And of course, that's really important for our standards. But the other two pieces for me are just as important. And sometimes we kind of skip over them. So first of all is the CPD. So making sure people are maintaining that competency and broadening their knowledge as well. We're all learning all of the time. But the other one, which has come up as well, is that code of practice, code of ethics, professional conduct, and it's about how people work. So in terms of moving forward, I think first of all we need to make sure that we're accessible at all levels, and I mean kind of education levels and job levels and other things as well, to make sure that we're giving everybody who works in the environment the ability to say, well, I am competent at this level and I'm working to this code of professional conduct, rather than just some of our higher levels. So I think that's really, really important for us going forward. We've just done some research on green jobs and green skills that we'll be sharing with you all soon. And it's quite startling when you ask people, do you want a green job? And first of all, people go, oh, yeah, it could be interesting. So what does a green job mean to you? Oh, I don't know. What does green skills mean to you? Well, I don't really know that either. And then when you say to people, actually, these are the kind of jobs to move forward and deliver on climate change, we need lots of welders and we need people who are going to dig trenches and all these things. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. So there is a real challenge around status of the profession, around status in decision-making, around accessibility, and actually making the environment a career choice. And I think we've got a real piece of work to do around making sure we're bringing all of those things together. And ultimately, going back to decision-making, I'm sure everybody in this room and many of us know people who make decisions without considering the environment, without consulting with an environmental professional. And my request is for everybody to help us move that dial. So how can we get people to do exactly what Will has just been saying, that chartered environmentalists and our other registers have the same status in terms of decision making, and we've got a lot of work.
Thanks, Emma. Will, sorry. So, Will, I mean, just thinking about that attractiveness of this of this as a career trajectory, maybe maybe we should be asking younger people in the audience, but no offense, I mean, I'm one of the elderly ones now. But how do we build that community of people, and how do we build that pipeline of people coming into the profession and show them how they can be part of the solution to the challenges that we face, and that actually kind of deals with some of that anxiety that we're seeing with people around things like climate change and environmental degradation?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Martin. I wish I knew the definitive answer to it, which I'm sure I don't, but I think my answer is that it's a responsibility, a task, a never-ending job for us all within the professions to keep driving forward on the importance of these issues, both professionally but also socially in society. So in the end, I think if you ask a man or a woman on the street now, is accountancy important in the proper running and governance of society, they say yes, and the same for law. And I think we need to get to that position where environment is equally, if you like, equally valued. But the pressure so to do will come from society. But it's important that we help drive that.
Thanks, Peter. You wanted to come
Yeah,
in.
I mean, we often talk about death by 1,000 cuts, but the opposite of that is life with 1,000 opportunities. And when we're talking about generality of the concept that we in the society, chartered environmentalists, can play a more proactive role in the future, we need to think about specific examples. And I'll give you one which is on the table at the moment. There's been a lot of argument, a lot of debate around operator self-monitoring. The system needs reform. Certainly you and I would agree on that, wouldn't we? The system needs reform. And we put forward, that's the Society for the Environment, SocEnv and the Water Conservatives have put forward some ideas as to how a new reformed system could operate. And we've drawn an analogy to the way in which you would operate in the water companies by saying that each water company should have an effluent quality assurance manager that would have the same kind of status as a health and safety manager. And a health and safety manager has to be properly qualified and have IOSH as a professional qualification. We've said that such an effluent quality assurance manager in the company should be qualified by being a chartered environmentalist. So there's a very specific example in a very current problem. And that's where we're going to be in future, is finding 1,000 opportunities for chartered environmentalists to play a more proactive role.
Thanks, Peter. And Carolyn, where do you see some of those opportunities in terms of that status, and where do you see professionalization of environment and sustainability having potentially that big effect?
It's a really huge question, that, Martin, because I'm probably closer than Peter is to saying I think there must be more central government control on some of these things. That implies that there are more people in government with an understanding of the environment and a proper understanding of environment, not some of the nonsense which we've heard over the last few years from all the parties, actually. So I think I can see government playing an important role. Actually, I do some work for Innovate UK, the government's innovation agency, on technical things to do with, environmental technologies. And actually, private industry's got a lot of things coming forward. There's lots of ideas coming forward there. And there are lots of people who, I see applications particularly for grant support. And there are lots of people putting forward applications without proper understanding of what they're trying to do. So you'll see, for example, applications for people to try and deal with indoor air pollution, right, when they don't actually recognise that most of it's coming from outside the building. And actually, there are particular tactics for dealing with that. Don't involve necessarily putting a filter in everybody's living room. So we need a good understanding of that. But many industries already have a good understanding. So I want to see more of those people chartered. I want to see more people in private industry with chartered environmentalist status. Not only the water, Peter, but much more widely than that. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, from our perspective, I think we see that happening. Interestingly, we see that happening as well in the financial services sector. There is a question mark about what I use the phrase skills greenwashing, because as environment and sustainability has become more prevalent, and actually the demand for people with that capability, and therefore there are people who are, if I say, flying kites about their capability. That is something that we need to be mindful of. But Emma, I just wonder. I mean, we talk sometimes about all jobs greener, and I know we've had these conversations. I mean, how do you see? One thing is around building this, the profession, the environment profession, but in part, its effectiveness is driven by the skills and capability of others to actually act on that advice and actually implement some of the solutions. Where do you see that need for kind of an approach to building that awareness and understanding across an organisation, not just in a small, narrow department or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's vital. I mean, it brings us back to status and it brings us back to trust. And I'm sure we've all had those conversations with people who say, oh, but I've just seen this YouTube video of this chap in Australia who says that blah, 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 blah. So being able to convince people, being able to enthuse people to make the change you need, of course, comes from that specialist. But having people then feel that actually I'm part of this and I understand it and I can implement this in my job is vital. So for me, it's both parts have to sit hand in hand. But we have to appreciate that people do need support and education and advice and guidance to know what they want to do. In our experience with Pledge to Net Zero, most people want to make a change, but they don't understand what to do, and they're concerned about doing the wrong thing and being criticised for doing the wrong thing. So it's about how do we grow that knowledge and that skill set in people who, as well as have those environmental professionals as well.
And I know you've been involved in apprentices and apprenticeships and apprenticeship standards. Do you want to say something about that? Because on the one hand, there are green apprenticeships, but then on the other hand, it's actually how do we support the greening of those occupations?
Yeah. So, and again, both of those things are absolutely vital. So there are environmental green apprenticeships at lots of different levels where you can do fantastic programs to become an environmental professional. But equally, those apprenticeship frameworks are now having green or environmental competencies embedded in for everybody. So whether it's hairdressing or whether it's car maintenance or many other things, it is something that is relevant to everyone. And apprenticeships are such a fantastic way of bringing people into the profession, not just young people, lots of career changes as well. And that's something that as a society we are working on and will be working on going forward.
Brilliant, thank you.
I mean, lots of organisations are motivated by money. And actually, if you look at what's happening in businesses at the moment, it's, I would say, the finance sector and particularly insurance where things are not greenwash coming through, because I think if I was looking at this 10 years ago, I'd have thought a lot of what was being said was just greenwash, just tokenism for shareholders. Actually now, insurance companies are seeing the implications of some of these environmental changes impacting on their business, and they need to understand the risks more fully, and they are moving on that, I think. So that I think that sector is probably doing pretty well. Other sectors much less so, but and I look forward to, for example, circular economics being picked up by manufacturing industry more widely than it is at the moment. But, you know, there are changes happening, and I think the money might lead us into more, you know, particularly fruitful territory.
One of our key target areas for professional registration is the ESG world. Ian and I have been talking about that, and you'd have seen Lara on the video as well, who works in that world, and recognising that many people are coming through that with really great environmental credentials, and other people are coming through with financial credentials, and it's how do we kind of help people get the extra competency they need, but also demonstrate their competence as well.
Right, I'm conscious of time. Are we on time? Are we over time? Are
Exactly on
We're
time.
exactly on time, which is probably a nice place to kind of bring this part of proceedings to a close. So I'd like to say a big thank you to my panellists. It's been great working with you over the last 20 years because it feels like a long time. Not for you. When you said it's a 20-year panel, I was thinking, crikey, that sounds like really boring, but it's a panel kind of reflecting on 20 years of SocEnv.
Back in the next 20 years.
But yeah, no, I've really enjoyed your contributions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Connections to make it with you, John. We can make it better.